everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to your Critique of the Week. It's Friday, November 24th, Black Friday. We've got a sale on critiques. They're free, today only. So if you bought them yesterday, they would have cost nothing, but now they're free. But so glad you could be here. Let's see, who do we have here? We have Sharon Ferrante, Nate Jacobs, Steve Horrell, Garima Saxana, Mary Keating, Dee Coleman, good to see you all. Keita Dozier's here, of course. Hello. Mark Grinier, Brian O'Sullivan, Monica Dobos, Soul Revolution Radio. Nice handle there, I like that. Rebecca Kate, good to see you. That's over on YouTube. Let's see if we got anybody on Facebook yet. Facebook's slower with their notifications than they used to be. Jenny Milton's here. Hello, Jenny. Let's see. All right. So as always, we are going to give that workshop experience. Sit around, talk poetry, talk about what works, what doesn't, especially what works and what doesn't for you. So leave as many comments as you can. This kind of feedback is just invaluable to writers. It's something you don't easily get, to actually hear what readers actually think about what you've written, what connects and what doesn't. That's really the main heart of what we're going to be doing, and then how we can try to improve the writing. We're going to try to help as many poets as possible. Now, I'm going to start doing this. I decided, based on what somebody said a couple weeks ago about not liking the delay of how long it was taking to have your poems appear, I'm going to try to be a lot more on top of the Critique of the Week submissions. And so we're going to do a lot more of this, going through the oldest ones. I think we'll maybe go even back and forth, picking out ones some weeks where it's I'm trying to find something in particular that's really interesting to talk about. And other weeks we will just be cruising through as fast as possible, and not giving equal time. Because I think it is true, the amount of time that we give you is probably should be determined partially by how much time you give yourself and how much work you're going to do. So we will just try to get through as much as possible and try to learn as much as possible as we go. Now, let's see, Attractive Fahey's here over on Facebook. Yeah, Facebook people used to roll in, and now, it's a sort of slow trickle to the point where I wonder if maybe, I do think about this, if maybe we should just stick to streaming on YouTube, because Facebook's kind of given up on being a video platform. It was really trying for a while, and they are no longer trying. Anyway, let's see. Dick Westheimer's here baking bread. Yeah, good to see you, Dick. And Paul Mitchell Bernstein, too. James Langford. Okay, we got a good crowd. All right, so I thought if we'd start out by taking a look at today's poem of the day, because I think there's a really interesting little lesson that we could go through in just a couple minutes about this poem. And it happens to be Monday's guest on the Rattlecast, Joshua Mensch. Joshua is also the editor of Body Literature, which is one of the best online, maybe the best online poetry journals there are. So do check that out. Bodyliterature.com, I believe, is the website. Joshua was the founding editor. His book, Because, is the book that we're going to be talking about mostly on the episode on Monday. And today happens to be the day that he had his poem as the daily poem from the fall issue of Rattle. And the poem is right here. This is Joshua Mensch, Active Sabotage. And this book is Because, and all the poems in here, it's a lyric memoir. And everything starts out with Because. So he's continuing that, I guess. And this is an act of sabotage. So let's hear the story. And I just want to talk about one detail here as we go through. But let's take 3 minutes and listen to this poem first. I'll be right back with hey, give it a listen.
An act of sabotage. Because I was young and heretical, I wanted to be a radical. I spiked trees to save them. This, I was told, was the right thing to do. Each tree found with a spike ruins the forest around it. It wasn't true, of course. The lumberjack's logic, practical, is to find the spike, cut beneath it. But being young and eager to see myself in the act of saving trees, I whacked nails into bark at my height and felt very militant and right. Years later, I met a man with a missing thumb. Half of one hand was gone. And still being young, I asked him what had happened. I was cutting wood, he told me. A nail in a log wrecked the chain off the saw and whipped his hand clean through. So now he rides a mower for the church. Though it was many years before and somewhere else, I felt ashamed. A man's life, possibly, for a tree that would be cut down anyway. What dumb advice. I remembered the man who had given it to me. Mid-30s, mustached, with wraparound sunglasses and a sleeveless tee, holding a paddle. He was a river guide. We were in a rubber raft. Who leaned in to whisper the name of his group, Earth First, but don't tell anyone, and offer useful tips for conspiring. Sugar in gas tanks, destroy engines, loosen lug nuts, topple trucks. Flames ruin wood raped from the earth. And of course, spiking trees, an effective means to defend against the enemy. I sat before the enemy, ashamed, and told him what I'd done years before. He told me not to worry. I'd botched the job, and anyway, the nail he hit was one he'd put there himself and then forgotten. But chainsaws are smarter now, so deaths and injuries are rare. Though he agreed that I was right to feel like an asshole. There are better ways to save the earth, he said. There was a shadow on the field from a cloud that had grown heavy while we were talking, and were it not for the wind, it might have rained. I could hear the cries of the gulls from the sea beyond the hill, and the bell of a church began to ring. Later that night, my father made a fire in a ring of stones. Flames tongued out of the wood like sea anemones searching for food. We had chosen nature, the quiet burning of expired stars in a place without a roof, where the rushing of the surf was our radio. To keep warm, we burned wood and talked about the future, which seemed far away, theoretical, and entered into a new conspiracy, a dream in which we were happy and our existence felt justified and good because we were moral people and the trees forgave us our sins because they understood.
Yeah, and so that was once again Joshua Mensch with today's poem of the day on rattle.com, An Act of Sabotage from the fall issue. And what I wanted to point out here is the sort of arc of this poem. And what makes it go from a good poem to an especially good poem is the kind of thing that we talk about a lot on the critiques, which is, a lot of times I'll say, the poem doesn't go far enough, like push it farther, right? I mean, that's just a common thing that you hear. Like we tapped into some sort of vein that's interesting to us, but we didn't dig deep enough. We didn't push it far enough. And I want to just show this about the poem. So just think of the arc. We'll sort of describe the poem as we go. So at the beginning, he's talking about when he was young, thought he was a radical. So there's this whole sort of setup of like this sophomoric position of thinking that there's easy solutions and, you can just do this kind of sabotage and, et cetera. We get the story of spiking the trees to try to save them so that lumberjacks couldn't log them. And so we get this story here. And then there's the turn here, which we might consider the turn in the poem, right? We always say there's got to be some kind of sense of movement, right? Like some kind of, going from one place to another so we feel transformed when we're talking about the poem. And so this is years later, I met another man. So we move forward in time and we meet a man with a missing thumb and we get the story about the lumberjack who lost half of his hand because of a nail in a tree. And what I noticed about this poem that I wanted to share was the way that we could have, Joshua could have ended the poem there. He could have, it'd be very easy to, and then we get we get the story of the Earth First and how he came to spike the tree. So we get this full arc of the story, and then he sits before the enemy. I'd botched the job, blah, blah, blah. But we could really easily see the poem ending somewhere like right here. Like maybe not ending on he said, but ending on that quote. Maybe there are better ways to save the earth, structuring it like that so that feels like an ending. And if we did that, we would feel like there was this sense of arc and transition. But if it were, we would say, I would say in a critique, like I wish, it feels like it wants to go further, right? We could also imagine it ending, moving a little bit farther by ending on the image. So then he goes to, from this conversation in that last line, which the former lumberjack said, we could imagine it going into the image in the scene and saying there was a shadow on the field from a cloud that had grown heavy while we were talking. And were it not for the wind, it might have rained. Like that could have been this sort of like movement to an understated image and on an image, like we always say. We could even keep going and ending on the bell ringing. I could hear the cries of the gulls, and the sea beyond the hill, and the bell of a church began to ring. And we would say that the church represented a kind of moralness that was reminding him of the way he behaved, and that there's that kind of metaphor there. That would be an ending that somebody might have ended on. But then what Joshua does is keep going with the poem. Later that night, my father made a fire in a ring of stones. Flames tongued out of the wood like sea anemones searching for food. So great lines too. I mean, it's a good addition to the poetry on a poetry line level. But he's adding to the layer and the depth of what he's actually mining. Like the actual meaning that he's seeking is in this later part where he's talking. It's his father, right? Yeah, my father made a fire in a ring of stones. Yeah, so he's having this conversation with his father over it while the stars are sort of burning out over their heads. In this wood is burning for the sake of the fire that they're having. They are sort of sacrificing this wood, which adds a whole nother layer. This wood, he was trying not to chop down trees. Now he's just burning them. And so that adds a whole nother layer of meaning and thoughtfulness to what we're doing. And he gets all these great lines about, where's the one I love? The one about the flames tongued out of the wood like sea anemones searching for food. That flame. So even the fire is sort of searching for something to eat and consume. And so we get this whole, our whole place within the universe, not just this one story of the interaction between really the, me having spiked the tree, me, the narrator, having spiked the tree. And then I met this person who had his hand injured by somebody who'd spiked the tree. Turned out to be himself, but still we have that story, but then it becomes a story about our grand place in the universe and the way that creatures consume things and the morality of that and how that all balances out. And, the difficulty and complexity of that comes out because we extended the story past where an ending might have been. And so every time on these critiques where we talk about the poem should have ended there, or should have, pushed forward beyond where the ending was, and we can't really generate that for you, but pushing the poem to another place, going to another place in time, like Joshua does here, going to another image, going to just something that seems like a leap, like in a haiku would be, or like from the, from the prose section to the haiku and a haiban maybe. That kind of sense of motion where we push the poem even farther is what makes the poem great instead of just a poem good. The poem, if it ended earlier, would have been a pretty good poem. I mean, the lines are, it's an important story. It's memorable what happened. There's a good line. Even, there are better ways to save the earth. There's a good way to end. So it would have been a fine poem, but it's a great poem because it pushed itself further. And so I think that was a great example of pushing itself further, which you could do for other examples. It just, reading it this morning, it came to me that would be a good one to talk about. All right, so that is so a great story here. Yeah, the narrative arc is so complete and smooth. Yeah, and the ending. Yeah, so that's what it does. So that's what we want to, when we're talking about pushing the poem farther, that's what we mean. Okay. So now let's start doing some poems from the queue. And I should say, because it really helps to say it, if you enjoy the critique of the week, make sure you click the like button, and make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you ring the bell for notifications. Make sure you share it if you're watching on Twitter or Facebook. Facebook only has a few people watching. It's 15, and it used to be so many more. So share the Facebook one if you want to. That would be helpful. But anyway, let's take a look at some poems from the queue. And the first up is December 12th, 2022. So this is what I don't want to have. I don't want to have submissions that are a year old. I want everything to be like within a month or two, because it's true what whoever said, waiting that long for a poem, it sort of really defeats the purpose of having a critique like this. We want to do them while they're hot, so we should consider that. So this is Muhammad Ahmed from Richmond, Texas. And this poem is Team USA in the World Cup. And let's just take a look here. And this is the kind of thing I'm going to do. So I'm flipping through this poem, and then we got to shrink this size of this. Hang on a second. Where's the edge? Sorry. So I don't mean to make you dizzy. Oops, that's not what I want to do. I want to do that one. Okay. Yeah. So we can fit it all on the screen. And so this is Team USA Road to the World Cup. And now looking at this, in 2023, United States for the first time made the Cricket World Cup. They were the last team to qualify and had the least chance of winning it. In fact, England, Pakistan, and Australia had a better chance of winning the World Cup than the United States winning one of their matches. Just an idea. The poem, I mean, I just glanced at it before, but it goes on like that. Really sort of like an essay with no breaks. I mean, it's one long paragraph. And just that's, I'm just going to say with this one, that's too much for a poem. If that comes in as a submission, I would do what I just did and say TLDR. I mean, maybe if there was something really great, that's why when we had that the Poetry Space episode about how important beginnings are, if there was something like amazing in the first line, I mean, maybe it would have compelled me to read the whole thing. But like, I mean, this is 7 pages of solid text. I mean, that's like what? 2,000 words. I mean, respect editors' time, and it's just too much to read. Also, prose poetry is a thing. Prose poetry exists. This could be prose poetry, but prose poetry, it has to be so focused on the image really to stay poetry, that it to stay sort of locked in that because a poem was like a story of the moment, and to be locked in the moment, it has to be really concrete and tight, and it can't really work at this massive length too. So I wouldn't call it poetry. So if we want to write a poem about this topic, the Team USA road to the World Cup, then that'd be great. But this isn't it. We have to really condense. Poetry is about condensing and being short, about providing this massive amount of insight in as little amount of time as possible. Even if one line, like a haiku, provides so much of a world, and that's what we're trying to do, is condense it down that much, not be 7 pages of text. Okay, let's move on to the next one. But we will. What was I doing? Oh, I gotta label it something. I guess I put it in. Okay, there we go. Then I can reply to everybody and let them know we talked about their stuff today. Okay, next up we have Adrian Watts from Illinois. This is Blues, and Adrian says, I've been writing all my life. Work varies. I guess now that I'm getting older, it would be nice to know if anything is good. One wants to feel something in a poem, preferably within a framework of a story. That's a good definition, yeah. Feel something within the framework of a story. I don't know if it has to be a story, but that's a whole chunk of what poetry can do and is. For me, there has to be some kind of story, and I don't like to bore folks in and out. That's a good thing to think of, too. Poems are usually musical as well in some way. What have I achieved in my goal? Is this poem memorable? Where did I go wrong? Would love to hear some comments. Adrian Watts. And so that was the note that came with this. And I think great description of what we should be trying to do with poetry and how it works, what's successful. And being memorable is such a key aspect of it too. So really well put there, Adrian. Let's take a look at this poem, Blues, which of course, and this is like I said, I flipped through a lot of these because I'm looking for, poems that have, certain form or something that we can talk about. I probably read this once, but haven't read it in forever. I don't remember anything. But also, it's kind of like the submission process. You get to feel what it's like to be an editor submitting or reading submissions here when we flip this on and see what this poem is. This is Blues, again by Adrian Watts. Blues. The blues are hues mixed with green and water. Common color everywhere crashes into me, engulfed in the wave above my skyline. Cannot escape, try to relate. No way out, looking down in places where light dances on snowy ground. Permanent like a blockchain, in places profound. Crystals and ice sparkle, missing you, bloody battle, bruised brother. This isn't a backdrop. The weather throbs, cluster clouds. Gruesome gray makes me want to pray, kneel to feel blasting wind, wanting to see you from within. Skin so pale, frail, tones of the tiresome trail, beaten by ultramarine. Cobalt cobblestones painfully underfoot from everything we've seen. Navy patches and heavens above a brilliant blue sea no one can believe. Sparkling blueberry aqua filling vacant hearts of cyclonic seamen, once lost at sea, who don't realize how salty loss can be. 10 fathoms of history under feet cannot see love for what it's meant to be. So that is this poem, Blues, once again by Adrian Watts. And I forgot, let me do one thing. Let me fix this really quick because I have the, I should have the poem over here. So that I can look at the comments too. Sorry about that. Let's see. So here's the actual poem. This is a better setup. And sorry. And let's see. I'll get this back on the screen. And I gotta just, there we go. That's what we want to do. That's what we want to do. Okay. So for blues, get this distractions out of the way too. Okay, for blues, the thing is, I think there was a nice rhythm and nice sounds. There's a lot of little rhymes that come through in this poem. But I feel, you mentioned, Adrian mentioned storytelling as part of the key to poetry. And what's really missing is my sense of story, my sense of place. The blues are hues mixed with green and water. Common color everywhere crashes into me, engulfed in the wave above my skyline. Cannot escape, try to relate. No way out, looking down. So are we actually in the water and the ocean? Like I'm not. It's hard to get a sense of like where we are in this poem, and you might say that being jostled around by the water is like a feeling I'm trying to create, but we need a sense of where we are so we can connect with it, and so you can't have a poem that connects with people that doesn't have a way to connect. And I think, feeling sort of like lost and disconnected and confused about where we are doesn't let us really engage with the poem as much as we should. So finding, maybe in the title, finding a way to explain where we are, what's going on, so that we know where the blue hues mixed with green and water, like where the water is, who we are, what we're doing, those things, get those things up front. Looking down in places where light dances on snowy ground, permanent like a blockchain. So that's the thing, like a blockchain, like what does a blockchain have to do with the water? I feel like we're just sort of jostled by images that don't connect. There's no sort of common thread that we can hold on to and let us feel like we're connecting with a human being. So finding that thread, a lot of times that's narrative. We talk a little bit, I think we talked about a guzzle a couple of weeks ago. There can be a thread that's the rhyme scheme. And that's one thing too that can pull you through. But there needs to be something that connects it together so we know kind of where we are and what's going on. And I think I feel a little lost in this poem. But now that I can actually see comments without losing the poem, let's see. Yeah, so as Paul Mitchell-Bernstein says, it seems more wordplay than narrative. Like it was fun to write. It's good wordplay. And yeah, I agree. There's a nice sounds and rhythm to it. I just don't... and Brian O'Sullivan too agreed. It does sound like it was probably fun to write. Yeah, and Mary Keating, I'm missing the story as well. So that's the thing. We're missing a sense of like who is doing what and why. And as there's nice lines, Mary Keating says water dancing with snow is confusing as it's mixing seasons. Yeah, so I just there's interesting play. There's good sounds. There's good music, but I don't feel like there's anything to connect with. I feel like jostled around and confused. And that's it's just not something that actually works to connect with people. So let's see. Ice crystals and ice sparkle, missing you. So now all of a sudden we're missing you, and this is way into the poem, and you appears. And who is the you? Gruesome gray makes you want to pray. Kneel to feel blasting wind, wanting to see you from within. Who's the you? Skin so pale, frail tones. Because the you could be me. Are you talking to me? Or is the you like some lost love? Is the you? I mean, who is the you? And if we don't know, we can't connect to the poem. We have to like enter. Another poet says it's just pure description. We have to. There's this thing called method acting, where the actor inhabits the body of the character, and sort of then you act spontaneously within, and you're not really acting. You're just like, becoming the character, and that's what the great actors do. But that's what you're trying to let the reader do with a poem, is enter, and so we become the speaker. And if we don't know who we're talking to, because we don't have the knowledge that the speaker does, we can't make that connection and enter the poem. And so that's the thing that's going on. Garima Sexana says his brother was lost at sea as a serviceman, I think. And that could be. I mean, it feels like there's something beneath it. But if we're guessing, then we are not connecting. And so we need to know. If it is, we get later to the... where is it toward the end? Cyclonic seamen lost at sea who don't realize how salty loss can be. So is that a metaphor? Is that literally something that happened that's true? Unless we know, if we're guessing, we can't have an emotional reaction to it because it's too ambiguous. It's too sort of ephemeral and there's nothing to grab onto. So if it is a story like that the brother was lost at sea, tell us that. Like, tell us that up front. The brother, in the title, in the first couple lines, like set us up so we know where we are, so we can start to feel something. Okay, I think it's probably. Let me see if there are any other comments to pass along. Jenny Middleton says, I think the idea of feelings being mixed up or confused is how the narrator feels, but I agree. I think there is a vagueness to the you and also what has created the feelings too. Yeah. And I want to really stress this. Like there's a sort of way that, we think, I feel lost, so I want the reader to feel lost. That's the thing that I'm trying to convey. That's something that you hear a lot, but it just doesn't actually work. Like we have to have something to connect, or we can't connect to it and then we don't care. So we need the story. Mary Tora Grossa says, with all the interesting wordplay, there should be less, more refined, jumping from place image to place image. Yeah, exactly. And hey, Mary, it's good to see you, by the way. I was just thinking about you because you're the one person I know from Rhode Island. And I don't know if you saw, but last week's guest in the Rattlecast, Carrie Shipers, was from Rhode Island and talked about moving there. But anyway, let's see. We'll move on from this poem. But I like your I like the sounds and the wordplay, and I like the idea of poetry that you expressed in the comment too. I think that's definitely what to reach for. It's just I think it's missing the story, and we want to hear the story. So anyway, let's move on to the next one, and I should give this a label 2 so that I can know that we talked about it. Okay. And then next up, we have Sarwa Aziz. And this is Memories, and there's no questions here, so let's just take a look at the poem. Sarwa is from Utah. So here we go. Sarwa Aziz. The poem is Memories. Here we go. Memories. I think I can zoom in a little bit on this one. Memories. Tonight I want to hold this foreign night between my eyelids, squeeze it tight until its dark blood smudges all my memories. In my dream I am a child again. Only this time I am not weak and frightened. I come out of the bunker and stand up straight and still. I chase all the bullets back into their sleeping chambers. I wake up and try to write about this. I try to keep my words big and loud. I disguise the poem that I wrote about home so it won't get deported back to its cold pages. Now that's interesting. I really like the twist here. And again, it's the Sarwa Aziz with Memories. And I kind of like where the poem went. Like it went somewhere, which is one of the things. A lot of poems don't go somewhere. And so this kind of does. There's a sense of movement and sense that something happened in the poem, which is nice. Yeah. So tonight I want to hold this foreign night between my eyelids, squeeze it tight. I think the rhyme from night, because it's not, if you rhyme in the first, end rhyme in the first 2 lines, it feels like more rhyme's going to come. You're teaching the reader to listen for more rhyme like that, end rhyme. And then when it doesn't come, it feels like a sort of a letdown or like something's missing. And it also, I think it feels a little forced too, to go from night to tight right there like that. So I would find a different word choice. Squeeze it tight. I mean, just for that rhyme isn't worth it. It's not a rhyming poem. And so throwing us off that way detracts more than it adds. So I'd find something different there. Until its dark blood smudges all my memories. So the dark blood smudging my memories, I think, I like the foreign night between my eyelids, but the dark blood smudging memories is hard to see as a metaphor, and it doesn't really fit right. It feels a little off. So I think there could be something. So from this little section right here, I think could be improved in sort of multiple ways, these 3 lines. And so I think it hasn't really found itself yet. It's interesting. It's like you can see the poem looking for itself. Like, am I going to be a rhyming poem? No. Is this what I'm talking about? No. And then we get to here. So I think maybe we could just cut the first stanza, even though I like that foreign night line. And maybe even that could be the title, This Foreign Night. And then we start here, in my dream, I am a child again. So doesn't it feel like the start of a poem? So I think maybe that's a better start. Only this time I am not weak and frightened. I come out of the bunker and stand up straight and still. I chase all the bullets back into their sleeping chambers. I love that line too. I chase all the bullets back into their sleeping chambers. Anytime you talk about bullets, they're sort of a melodrama because it's so dramatic in real life. But that's creative and interesting enough, the sleeping chambers aspect, especially when we're talking about night in a dream, that's great. So I really like that line too. I wake up and try to write about this. Try to keep my words big and loud. I like the big and loud too. I think, yeah, Paul Mitchell Bernstein, I think, said he likes the big and loud. Yeah, I wake up and try to write about this. I try to keep my words big and loud. I disguise the poem that I write about home so it won't get deported back to its cold pages. And it is quite a turn from from this dream and what it means to trying to write about it. But I like that. I like that sense of movement there. It feels a little sort of like rushed and complete, like we moved a little too quickly from that. I really love that in my dream. I think this stanza is great. Sort of every aspect. I think it's a great start too. I think maybe what's missing, it feels a little rushed in this part, and maybe it needs more. I think this stanza needs to be about as big as this stanza. You can feel sort of the missing element to it. I wake up and try to write about this. I try to keep my words big and loud. I blah, blah, blah. Like I want to blah, blah, blah. Like there's some kind of like explanation for who I am and what I'm trying to do that sort of goes right here. You can sort of feel the missing aspect, I think, just even in the rhythm. Like the brain wanted to say more and it didn't. So I think more description of like why am I trying to write? What is this? What is big and loud? Like so blah blah blah. Or, there's something a little more, another sentence there. And then in the end, I disguise the poem that I wrote about home so it won't get deported back to its cold pages. And I like the deported. I like the back to its cold pages. Yeah, I love that idea. Mary Keating says too. But I think because we're missing what we're doing, it feels like why is the poem being pulled? We're sort of missing the sort of explanation for why it would be deported. Although I like the idea, it's a good concept. Yeah. So I think the main thing, cut this stanza. I'd make this maybe the title, or find some other title, because the memories just doesn't add much. Or maybe memories of this foreign night. Maybe you could do something like that. And then explain a little bit more about what you're getting at here in this section. Like make this, add a sentence or two here, because you can feel the missing sentence. So, a bit rushed, as another poet says. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Rebecca Kate says, I delete both try in the third stanza. I wake up and try to write about this. I try to keep my words being loud. I don't know. I don't mind the try. I think the repetition of the try, that sound coming back, adds a cadence to it. And it really is about the failure of doing it. And so I think that it works for me. I'd keep the try. Mark Greener says the deported idea is original, but somehow it seems a little too easy, not really completing the living in a foreign land idea. Yeah. Another poet says, in the dream, he's braver than when he was a child. Maybe add more of the child's memory. And yeah, that's true. There's just more we could add. Like, it feels like it really, I think the poem really took off right here, and then it sort of rushed to the ending. And I think there's just more we can add. Looking back at that first 10 minutes, we were talking about Joshua Mensch's poem, how you push it farther, expand and go somewhere else and keep pushing this idea and seeing where it takes you. One thing you do, what Joshua did is push back to a different memory and like jumped in time. And then that allowed the subconscious sort of something else to graft onto and sort of build this, plant, this flower that kind of bloomed out of it, of the deeper idea. And so moving to a new scene or adding a new character or shifting your attention, any kind of like shift there will allow the subconscious to add and dig deeper into the topic of the poem. And then we get a lot more out of it. And so I would say this poem's incomplete, but a great start. And so just push it farther in this section. Okay, let's continue to move on. I like this, this pace is much better. So what did Dick Westerhammer say? This is Dick Westerhammer says, I will actually fill parts of a poem with blah, 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 or blankety blank, or whatever fits the rhythm I'm looking for when I know the poem needs more and I don't know what it is. That's a great suggestion. Yeah, that's true. I can hear it. Like, you can actually hear like the missing rhythm. There's like, it's almost like, like if you're listening to well, nobody's going to understand this reference, but remember when CDs used to skip and they had like these skip guards in your little Walkman and it would skip and skip to some other section, and you can feel like that there was this like section in the melody that was missing when it would skip, And I think that's kind of what you can hear in a poem, which is really interesting. But you can. There's like this whole rhythmic music to it that we don't really dissect or think about because it's so natural to speak in a language. We're so tuned to it as human beings that we don't think about it. We don't have to. But it's still there. And if you read enough poetry and enough just writing in general, and you can hear it. And so you can hear the missing ba-da-dum bump bump or whatever it is in this section here. You can like actually hear it. So if you don't know what to fill it in, do it with Dick's bada 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 or whatever he said. That's a great suggestion. Yeah, Monica Dobas. Yeah, everybody gets the reference. It's true. Okay. So let's see what we have next. So memories, I gotta label this too so that I can let the poet know. So next up we have, maybe I'll do it this way. Okay. So this is Roger Lindo in translation by Matthew Byrne from Oakland. He says, I'm currently translating a poetry collection, and while I'm fluent in Spanish, I want to make sure that the language I use comes through in English well. I'm not trained as a poet. I do not have an MFA. Rather, I'm a sociologist by training. As a result, I'm careful to make sure language mirrors the social realities of the poet, but sometimes I fear I am missing some lyricism. I've gotten critiques about how my translation is not always up to speed and runs the risk of losing the momentum of the lyrical junctures of the poems, particularly their soundscape, rhythm, and sound. I would absolutely love feedback on how I could improve my work and do justice to the poet's voice as it moves into a new language and culture. So it's really interesting. This is a translation of Roger Lindo, I guess you'd say. There's an accent over the O. And that reminds me of, this is kind of interesting. So this is, let's see how much poem. We have 2 poems he sent. Well, actually a bunch of poems. He has 4. Oh, he's the original Spanish as well. Okay, so that's what it is. So we'll take a look at it. This reminds me of this story. We had, I'll pull this poem up. We won't play the whole thing. So we had this poem, Baghdad Mon Amour by Salah Al-Hamdani. And this was taking place, we published this in issue number 25, summer 2006. And this was during the Iraq War. Salah Al-Hamdani is an Iraqi exile poet. So he'd been exiled from Saddam's regime, living in France. So he spoke French and Arabic, I assume. And so he had this poem, and he's friends with Sam Hamill, who we were interviewing for an issue coming up. So the story came up. I can't remember exactly how it came about. But he said there's this great poem that there's no translation in English. Can you find a translator? And all I did was ask for somebody. I just posted on a message board, and I said, who speaks Arabic and French? Because there was a French version too. And somebody who's completely not a poet at all, it was Molly DeShenis, said, hey, I know both languages. I know one more than the other or whatever, but let me see these things and I'll translate it. And she has no poetry experience whatsoever. And yet, this poem was translated beautifully, and Sam Hamill would love the translation. Salah Al-Hamdani was happy with it too. Through Sam, we talked about it that way. And so this is Baghdad Mon Amour. Oops, I guess I have to put it on this screen. Hang on. But my point, this is somebody who is not a poet whatsoever. And still, listen to and all she did was sort of translate it into the rhythms of English, So Baghdad Mon Amour, you cannot be crucified on the side of a page of a story that is not your own, nor to the rhythm of the deaths that brood your plagues, because there will be no cry to relieve your grief. You cannot be crucified on the banks of the streams, your body bleeds, when the Euphrates washes away the secret of its soul at the birth of a new defeat. I know this, no wound deserves a war. And it goes on like that. It's a beautiful, beautiful poem about war. And, but you don't, I don't know. We are so attuned to the music of language. We speak extemporaneously. We know how rhythm works just intuitively. That I think thinking too much about it, unless it's, when it gets difficult is when it's like, syllabic translation, translation from the French that's trying to keep the form or something like that, because French is a totally different way of timing its language. It's syllabic stressed time, or rather than stress timed. and it just makes a totally different rhythm and things like that when you're talking about keeping the poem formal. But if it's just free verse and you're just listening to your own ear as somebody who reads and speaks English, that's kind of all that's necessary, I think. And maybe that might be a controversial opinion, but I think Baghdad Mon Amour shows that, and I think you see it fairly often that the poetry comes through. And so I think maybe the fear is a little too not really necessary. But anyway, let's see what the actual poems are. This is Irma. Let me kind of fit it on the screen. This is the English translation. I guess it's 31. The Spanish is down here. A la Irma, volveré, si volveré a mi país. So I don't know Spanish to know what that means, actually. I'll come back. Yes, I'll come back to my country, to where the waters diverge. I'll go awaiting myself, lying ambushed there, where the leaves turn to rot, and my homecoming will arrive as the private melody of asphyxia's breathless triumph. See, I think there's nice rhythm and music to that. I think we already have it, and I think just staying true to the rhythms of English within the content that's going on, we have something that works pretty well. So anyway, I'm not sure how much advice I can give because I don't speak, I'm not speak Spanish, not at all really. I took a few years of it in high school and college, but haven't practiced it very well. So I can't really help on the translation itself. But let's read the poem. We'll read just the first one and see if there's any suggestions about keeping it musical. Yeah. Okay. So, okay. Yes, let's just read this. 31 to Irma. I'll come back. Yes, I'll come back to my country, to where the waters diverge. I'll go awaiting myself, lying ambushed there, where the leaves turn to rot, and my homecoming will arrive as the private melody of asphyxia's breathless triumph, which clung to my lungs so tight I must have jolted up, blind every night. I have something to shout, to the heavy pall of childhood, to throw myself atop the day's prevailing winds, forever in my debt. Seeing myself peeping out through, they owe us, a generation, lost to all imaginable hell, torn open yet pure, yearning to leave. We who lost grip on the guardrails of kinship, vital to move, through neighborhoods and passages, around steins of beer and drunken worldliness, along a beloved table's edge. In losing every slat of its clean face, cleanly, savagely prim, the indispensable guardrails of friendship, accomplices of mine, coming apart at the seams on Saturday nights, and today they just wait anxiously at death's imposing and clamorous door to see if they can make out our steps on the other side of endless, tottering bridges, thrashed by shrapnel and disregard, to see if we arrive, names, embraces, gas, blackouts, and now that things are settling down, sloshing drunk like a basin filled with elegance and fortitude, friends, that is, siblings that see us arrive at their clamped doors. What next, now that nobody opens up, nobody rejoices, nobody bids farewell, because the deaths proved so grisly that parents even rejected their own children's tortured ashes? We'll return, but once there, the country is something else entirely, and our nature has changed, and best to not remind them anyhow. They wouldn't know how to console our foreign marksmen, ever at attention the whole night through. I'm afraid of going and finding them. Why the fuck did they do this to us? Leave us stranded with life? What kind of lives are in store for us now? Now that so many are their death. Now that... So that's it. That's an interesting ending. I wonder if the Spanish. Yeah, ahora tan nuestra, su muerte ahora que. So, yeah, so interesting. Now that so many are their death. See, that's the only thing that strikes me as a little. I would probably change this. I think this is kind of clunky in a way but otherwise, I think, yeah, I trip over this last bit, and I'm not. It looks. I mean, even though I don't speak Spanish, it looks smoother here, doesn't it? Does anybody in the audience speak Spanish? I mean, how would you translate that last? If you do, how would you translate those last 4 lines? Maybe there's a way that it's sort of a jarring that our, you know, our their death. I mean, maybe what you need is like a slash there. Our their death. Now that, I think I maybe take more liberties with this. Yeah, as Dick Westermer says, I really like this. Great images. The ending feels out of the register of the poem. Yeah, the ending just feels off. So Nate Jacobs. So Nate Jacobs speaks Spanish. So how is there a different way you'd translate this? Those last 4 lines. I wonder. What's the literal translation? Yeah, and Matt TC says, is now that a typo? Maybe we're just looking at a typo. It feels that way. It feels a little wrong. Let's see. Brian O'Sullivan asked a question too, as Nate's thinking about his translation. Brian O'Sullivan says, with the sometimes irregular spacing, though it might be necessary for faithfulness, make this harder to publish in some journals. And yeah, I know for a fact that some online journals I've heard, I won't name names, have said that they don't want poems with irregular spacing because it's really hard to do in HTML. And for Rattle, it's a pain in the butt. It is like, I know it's an extra admission price for me. It's going to take, like, instead of posting the poem online later, it's going to take 20 minutes instead of 5 to deal with how to space it right. And it's hard to navigate between div tags and like non-breaking spaces and things. And so it is, I know that in the back of my head that, it's I'm a little like, is it worth dealing with that headache? And usually the answer is yes. I don't think it affects me much, but I would say that it is a consideration. The other thing is, I've talked about this before, but a lot of times this falling phrasing where it's like, we'll look at the original, or I mean the translation, but the asphyxia's breathless triumph. There's sort of a melodrama that I feel of that. Like a lot of people have that at the end of stanzas where they do that, where it's like this like down step, and I'm not a big fan of it. But it's not to say that I won't publish poem for either of those reasons. It's just in the back of my head, it's a little, and how much do I subconsciously have that judgment? I can't really say, so maybe. Let's see. Monica Doba says it's supposed to be an open ending. There's just something about the ending that if it's open and it's supposed to be, maybe if there was like a dash, like an M dash here, there's a way that now that so many are, if there was a dash, are, dash, their, death, now that, and maybe like a ellipsis, I think maybe, so Grima Sexana says that the Google Translate literal translation is now so are her dead, now what? So very similar. So I think maybe what we need is more punctuation. Maybe the Spanish, there's a lot of things that are different about languages, that what they can allow as far as punctuation and order of, subject, object, verb, things like that. The syntactical, like underlying structure that we don't think about. There are a lot of things that are different about different languages. Maybe it's a little more confusing in English without punctuation than it is in the Spanish. And so I think maybe we could do, I'm thinking that we could, cause so many, it's like R is a replacement for so many. So I think dashes, so many are, and then if we had a dash there, then we'd sort of get the sense of the breakup that we're substituting many for R for there. And I think that would be a little more clear. So I tripped over that last thing at the end, but otherwise, as Dick said, I really love this translation. I think there's music to it. It's a free verse poem. And so you're sort of being faithful to the freedom that it was operating within, but operating within the rhythms of the English language. And I think it's musicality to it. You can see, because the poem is a good poem, rich with detail, those details translate into English, just by translating. And so I think the poem works. And by listening to your own ear, as somebody who's a native reader and speaker of English, you're doing justice to the music of the language too. So I think the translation is great. The only thing is, I think the last 4 lines are confusing. And so maybe punctuating it differently would fix that. Okay, let's move on to the next poem. That was interesting, though. The first time we've ever had anybody ask about a translation. We have a whole series of essays on translation by Art Beck, if you can find them somewhere on the massive Rattle website. It was called The Impertinent Duet, about all the difficulties of translating. And the one I think of all the time are, idioms are so hard. because it's like such different references and trying to figure out how to re-reference that. He calls it the impertinent duet because it's like a dance with somebody who's tough to dance with, and that's what the act of translation is. Yeah. So Nate Jacob says, I like the translation too, but translation is a subjective approach to language, and my own would be quite different. Yeah, and that's true. I mean, there's so many ways to go about it. That's why you can have like 50 different translations of some text, because people make different decisions about what's important and what's not. And there's just this whole world of translation that's really interesting. Yeah. Okay, well, let's move on. So Wendy Wynn, we'll do more. Wendy Wynn suggests, so now, line break, R, comma, there, line break, death, what now? And rearranging the order of that instead of, or what now at the end. That would be helpful. I don't know. I think this is something I maybe take a little more liberty with. And you can see that, like, one of my favorite poets is Eugenio Montale, but only when he's translated by Charles Wright, because Charles Wright takes a ton of liberties with the translation. And then the other translator is William Arrowsmith, and he's much more accurate. And it just doesn't have the music that Charles Wright adds. Or not the music. It's not really the music. That's not the right word. It's just the freedom to make changes like as big as changing these lines. So it depends where you want to be as far as... There's so much that goes into translation. All right. Yeah. So, okay. So let's look at another poem. And thanks for sharing that, though. We didn't look at both because I'd have the same thing to say about both, but it's really interesting. I'm glad you shared that. Thanks for sharing it. Once again, that was Matthew Byrne translating Roger Lindo. So, okay. So let me note that we talked about this and move on to the next poem. Next up, we have Judith Vaughn. And Judith does not have any questions. The poem is here pasted into the body of the submission form. It's Call It Any Name. She sent this poem, when did she send it? January 11th of this year. We're up to 2023, so that's nice. And let's take a look. Call It Any Name. I'm going to clear my throat and take a sip of coffee. Hang on. Okay, so Call It Any Name. Here we go. Call it any name. Yesterday, I stood in front of a purple Mexican bush sage. Though call it any name, call it something beautiful, call it a color reflecting sunlight, tangible as the glimmering hummingbird hovering around, whose harmonic, cricketing hum awakened my delight. I spoke to my companion, look at the world reaching out in splendor and celebration, isn't it grand? He cocked his spotted head, his amber eyes smiled, assent, his tail wagged, he sniffed the fragrant air wafting. All of us joined cells, one chimera. Chimera? How do you say that word? Chimera, I think? Anyway, a moment in the day. And I guess it's the end. Trembling Heart is the next poem? Yeah, I guess Trembling Poem. Sorry. So let me read the end because I screwed that up. I thought it was going to continue, and that's another poem. I spoke to my companion. Look at the world reaching out in splendor and celebration. Isn't it grand? He cocked his spotted head. His amber eyes smiled assent. His tail wagged. He sniffed the fragrant air wafting. All of us joined cells. One chimera, a moment in the day. Yeah. Okay, well, that was an interesting turn because you didn't realize it's the dog, which is kind of fun. I'm going to put this because I think one of the things that it was trippy to read partly because of the line breaks. So I think I want to talk about the line breaks a little bit with this poem. So let me put it throw it in a Word document really quickly. How do I get to my document? There we go. Let's throw it in this Word document. Sorry, it lost the line breaks. I'm going to do it there. Now we save the line breaks and put it in here. Okay. So here is the poem in a document that I can edit. And Call It Any Name. Yeah, so Mary King says, love the introduction of the dog. It is really nice. I like that. Oh, it's chimera. Thank you, Dick. Yeah, Dick and Monica. Yeah, chimera. I knew I was saying it wrong. I've heard it before, but not that often. Chimera. Okay. Anyway, call it any name. So I think that it really trips me up um, using the line break here because you expect it to be a full phrase, then dropping sage down makes it really trippy just to hear, and you kind of because you don't expect it to sort of that noun, that proper noun to continue. So yesterday I stood in front of a purple Mexican bush sage. So I would either make the line like longer like that, or shorten these all these lines to make it so you don't have to have that break there. They'll call it any name, call it something beautiful. Also, this something beautiful, feels off to me too. So I don't know. I'm wondering what I'd do with the line breaks. Call it a color reflecting sunlight. So what we want to do, we talk about this all the time, but the line breaks are sort of a pacing for the poem because we tend to read slower if there's shorter lines and focus more on the individual sounds of the words. Than when it's more prose-like, we tend to get more lost in the meaning of the words. And so there's this continuum between the two. Just naturally for how you would read and just engage with the text. I don't know if you can really help it feeling it that way. And I wonder if this poem, does it want to be slower or does it want to be fast? I'm thinking maybe slower. So call it any name. What would we do if we had short lines? Yeah, so Sharon French says, yes, shorten the lines. Yeah. So yesterday I stood, and I would bring it there, in front of a purple Mexican sage bush, or Mexican bush sage. They'll call it any name, call it something beautiful. I'd probably break the beautiful there if we're doing short lines. That's the thing with a short line, you can get away with more enjambment too because we're going at a slower pace just naturally. And so I think that break actually works when you shorten the lines. So I'll call it something beautiful. What do we do, a single line there? Maybe call it a color reflecting sunlight. Maybe I don't know. I wonder. I'm trying to feel where it sounds right. Reflecting sunlight. Tangible is the glimmering hummingbird hovering around, whose harmonic cricketing hum awakened my delight. Does that feel better than it was originally? Yesterday I stood in front of a purple Mexican bush sage. I always want to say sage bush. Mexican bush sage. They'll call it any name, call it something beautiful, call it the color reflecting sunlight. Maybe I would do this one actually. But I think it does feel a lot better with shorter lines. Yeah, maybe I'd do it like that though. I think that's better. Call it a color reflecting sunlight. Tangible is the glimmering hummingbird hovering around. Maybe a hummingbird on its own. Harmonic. Yeah, maybe I'd do that. I think that's probably what I'd do. Yeah. Monica Dobos would take out harmonic. Yeah, the hummingbird hovering harmonic is a little bit too much. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think who's cricketing hum. Yeah, because it's got the hum too. So it's like 4 H's right there. Good point. So maybe, yeah, I'd do it like that. That's what I do. Yeah, and so you slow it down and you get to enjoy the sounds in those individual words a lot more because it's slower. And I like that. I would. I think great point. Whoever it was said the cutout harmonic. Monica Dobos. Yeah. Let's see. So anyway, yeah. So that's good. I think I spoke to my companion. I would probably jump into the dialogue, and then. So I would probably shift. I would probably do it like this because I think it's a nice shift. But then I think it works better if you just look at something. Yeah, look at the world reaching. Look at the world reaching out in splendor. I spoke to my companion. Spoke is a strange. I think I said, because one thing about said, we don't really talk about this because we don't have a lot of fiction. But said is a great word because we don't even notice or see it. And so when you're using dialogue, just using said, is sort of it just blows right by us. It's almost, I don't, I wonder if it's, because the function words are generated in the Broca's area and processed there rather than our frontal cortex. And I wonder if even said has gone to a place where it's done there, where it's just like automatic. We only see it like a pronoun, and that lets it get out of the way. And so you see all these like sort of novice writers say like, he explicated or whatever, and trying to use verbs for speaking that have a lot more action. And really, you just want to get across who said what and get it out of the way. So said's way better than anything else in most cases, unless there's a really good reason. Anyway, look at the world, reaching out in splendor. I said to my companion. So we do it like that. Or maybe I don't know. I guess I forgot to do this. We keep this. I don't know. Do we want to keep this celebration like that? I said to my companion. Somebody suggested cutting the "Isn't it grand?" I saw that out of the corner of my eye. Monica Doba says I don't like grand though. It's too informal. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Does it really add anything? Do we even need that line? Should we just, I said to my companion, isn't it grand? Just repeats the same thing. And already, splendor, having celebration on top of splendor was already like, do we really need that? Or we could maybe do keep the grand. I think I might like the grand better than the celebration, actually. The celebration just doesn't add a whole lot. But isn't it grand does add a kind of informal cadence to it. So if we kept it, isn't it grand? I said to my companion. And so we're sort of thinking about more of a conversation. I think that is worth keeping because it makes it feel like we're talking to a human being. Like the isn't it grand is so casual that it feels like something you would say to a person, and then we realize that the person's a dog, which is kind of part of the point of the poem. He cocked his spotted head. His amber eyes smiled assent. Her eyes smiled assent. His tail wagged. He sniffed the fragrant, I keep saying fragrant air. He sniffed the fragrant air wafting. All of us joined cells. One chimera. A moment in the day. Let's see. So I love the way this is paced now, and I would probably just stick to one stanza because there's no reason. I'm not sure of the ending. All of us joined cells. One chimera. Oh yeah. So I think maybe joined. Yeah. So other times I take out wafting. I think I would take out wafting too. He sniffed the fragrant air. All of us. I think joined is kind of the wrong word. Connected or something like that. I don't know. I think we want like a synonym for that. Joined made me think for a second of like jail cells. I didn't go to biological cells, and I think, yeah. And as Rose Lenard says, wafting seems superfluous, and it was. I think because we had fragrance, so we know it's sort of wafting. We get that sense. But I think there's a different word for, yeah. One chimera, a moment in the day. Yeah, shared cells, as someone suggests. I'm not sure quite. I play with that. I'm not sure. I'm not going to take the time to go through all the possible words, but something like that. Joined is felt a little off. But otherwise, I like that. All of us shared cells, one chimera, and then a moment in the day. So it's the whole universe that's shared in this moment. Like instead of like this concept of the body and like separated by skin, like we're these different units. It's the moment in time that's like the one unit. I think that's really interesting. I really like that. I think Eric, or Paul Mitchell Bernstein, I should say, says, all of us one chimera. I don't know why I have trouble saying that word, chimera. It's just some kind of, once I got it wrong, it's like stuck lodged in my head wrong. But I think you need the cells for the concept. All of us one chimera. because it's really a stretch. Chimera is a mythological creature that's like different parts of different creatures like pasted together. So the idea that we're a chimera ourselves as our bodies and cells, I think it's an important element in a way of seeing it, because then you can step one further to the moment in the day. Yeah, so I would keep the cells. I just find the right way of phrasing that, though. Like a collection of cells. I think that's more what you want to get at. A body of cells. All of us a body of cells. What about that? He sniffed the fragrant air. How about both a body? How about this? Both. How about instead of all of us? Let's say both of us, because we're talking about the dog too. A body of cells. Or bodies of cells. How about that? He sniffed the fragrant air. Both of us bodies of cells. One chimera, a moment in the day. Yeah, that's what I would do. But I think the ending is the one thing to play with, and then the line breaks, just to slow it down and let us enjoy the poem. Okay. Well, anyway, it's past the hour. It's been a lot of fun. I think we're going to call it here. But it has been really fun. Call it any other name, or any name. And but it's been fun to break that apart and look at the difference between how it felt at first. Oops. And, with just this, we're not going to look at the Trembling Heart. Well, maybe I should. She sent 2 poems and we asked for 2. Let's do the other poem too. And sorry, we'll extend it a little bit, because we should do this one. So this was Trembling Heart. I'll put it in the doc file so we can at least we can, if we want to move stuff around, and I'll try to be quick with it, but I want to get to both poems. So here we go. It's deserved. Okay, so here we go. And again, the poet was who was the poet? Judith Vaughn from Sonoma, California. And let's take a look at Trembling Heart. Influenced by Henry Carlisle's poem Camouflage, which I don't know. You can look that up on your own, or maybe I should. Maybe I'll keep that in the Google, and we'll see if it matters. If we can find it. Let's see if we can find it really quick. Camouflage. No, I don't see it actually. It's not coming up quick on Google. So we'll have to guess at that relationship. But okay, here we go. Trembling Heart, influenced by Henry Carlisle's poem Camouflage. I've seen the smallest trembling heart of a spider. No heat-seeking technology required. Hanging from a just-spun web between ceiling and floor. She stops. Seen, her anxious heart shakes the web. The unexpected tremor portends no good end. She waits, vigilant watch, breath stops. I leave her there, safe for another time. Some spider's survival rate 7 years, born to live like all of us. I wish her well in a long life. So it's after Henry Carlisle's poem Camouflage, which might have something to do with spiders hiding and stuff. I like the I've seen the smallest trembling heart of a spider. I think it's a great start. We were talking about feeling lost in that earlier poem where we didn't really have a sense of place. But now we have the I, so we know it's the speaker is talking about themselves, seeing something, which is the spider. So we have this sort of context already set up. So it's a nice entry. And then the trembling heart of a spider. Heart's one of those words that frequently we we say it's a kind of a melodramatic word that has a lot of bad poetry, and so it's a bad, having poetry about hearts is like a risk. It's kind of it's almost always automatically cliche. So you got to be aware of that. But the smallest trembling heart of a spider, I don't know what the heart of a spider looks like. So instead of being this sort of generic concept for like love and all this stuff that it's a generic concept for, it becomes actually something interesting again, because I don't know what the heart of a spider looks like, and does a spider have a heart, or I don't know. I really actually don't. And so you sort of think about what that might look like, and that becomes something real and concrete from something that is normally just this dead metaphor or dead concept that's just, we've seen 1,000 times. So that's interesting. So I like that first line. No heat-seeking technology required. You need a hyphen there. No heat-seeking technology required. Hanging from a just-spun web between ceiling and floor, she stops. Seen. Her anxious heart shakes the web. I wouldn't repeat the heart. You know, I mean, one heart is tough to pull off in a poem. You did a good job getting the heart in the poem, and it works. But two is too much. So her anxiousness shakes the web. I mean, why not? The unexpected tremor portends no good end. She waits, vigilant watch, breath stops. I leave her there, safe for another time. Some spider's survival rate 7 years, born to live like all of us. I wish her well a long life. So I think the poem is interesting at the beginning, and then it ends up in another kind of poet cliche. Like there's so many poems about saving the spider, or saving the insect. And so as an editor, when I see this, I would think like, what does it add that other poems about not killing the spider? I mean, there's even going back to, is it Isa that has the one, like it's like, I paraphrase, but it's like, don't worry, spider, I keep a messy house or something like that. Or there's the other one about, sleeping and rolling over or not worrying about rolling over. I think that one is Busan. I can't remember exactly. But even back into the, 300 years ago, haiku era in Japan, we talk about saving the spider. And there's so many poems about saving the spider that if you're going to write about saving the spider, you're going to have to do it in a really interesting way. And I think it starts out interesting with a heart, and then humanizing the anxiousness is interesting, and I think that works. But then, and the detail of some spiders living for 7 years is interesting too. So there's sort of 3 bits of interest, and the question is, does it do enough to add those bits of in those bits of interest to carry a whole poem? And and I'm not sure. So I don't know. And so where can you take this? It's more surprising than just, I'm going to say, D. Coleman says, don't worry, spiders, I keep house casually. Who was that, Isa? Which poet was that? Anyway. But yeah, so how can you make this, more unique, more interesting, more surprising than these details? Where can you push it? And we talked about pushing poems farther. Where else can you go? Like, there's definitely something you wanted to write about. How can you make something new out of that is the question. Yeah. Michael says that's the Busan. Thanks for that. Isa is the, okay. Well, anyway, yeah, I mean, so where can you go that's sort of more interesting than this? I'm anxious. Her anxiousness shakes the web. I really like the poem up to there. But then the unexpected tremor, the turn it takes is just not interesting enough. So I think the poem worked in the first 5 lines, but then needed to go somewhere surprising in the last lines. I don't know. See, the thing is, so Paul Mitchell Bernstein says the spider bites her, or Rose Leonard says, could we end with her snaring a fly? And that the thing is, it needs to be a bigger leap than that. It needs to be something that that's completely unexpected for it to work. In the same way, going to the at the very beginning, that Joshua Mensch poem, going not just to the day around them, but later that night around the fire and the stars, and how different that is. Like, where else can we go that's totally different, that sort of speaks back to this moment? Talking to your daughter or something like that, or, being at church the next day. Yeah, I mean, I'm just throwing some things out, but really far leaps are what really are stimulating about this. So we have a nice setup. Where can we go that's like surprising and takes us somewhere really new? And I think that's what we should be thinking about with this poem, because it's a nice beginning. It's just that the end is expected. Anyway, okay, so that's going to wrap it up. We went 14 minutes over, but it was I had a lot of fun looking at these poems. A good group of them. Thanks for sharing them, everybody who did. Thanks for participating. For everybody who is out there and participating in the commentary threads, really appreciate it. Now, let's see. So, as I mentioned, Joshua Mensch is going to be this week's guest in the Rattlecast. Right. Oops, that's not it. This one. Joshua Mensch, his book is Because. Beautiful book, his first book, and it came out by Norton, which is really fascinating to see too. Love to hear how he pulled that off. He's also the editor of Body Literature, which is one of the best journals. I definitely recommend. They're great aesthetic taste in the website, and then they publish really excellent stuff. So check out them. Let me make sure I'm giving you the right URL. It's bodyliterature.com. Let's see. That might be wrong because it's not loading. Oh, there it is. Okay, bodyliterature.com. Yeah. Here, I'll show this on the screen too. This is Body. Well, I won't show it on the screen because I'll lose the music. Anyway, yeah, check out Body Literature, but he's the founding editor of that. His new book is, or his recent book, it's a few years old, is Because he was in the most recent issue of Rattle. So we'll be talking to Joshua Mensch. The prompt for this week was to write an epistolary poem, so a poem in the form of a letter to someone you are thankful for. So a Thanksgiving kind of themed prompt from Katie Dozier, our prompt poems editor. That is going to be the prompt for this week. The guest is Joshua Mensch, and note the special time. I almost forgot to say, he is in the Czech Republic. That's where he lives. So it would be like 2 a.m. there if we did it at the regular time. Instead, we're going to do it at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, which will give also folks in places like India and stuff a chance to watch live for once, which is nice. That is Joshua Mensch, Rattlecast 221, Monday, November 27th, noon Eastern time, 9 a.m. Pacific. I'm going to get up right away, get some coffee, and log on and start doing Rattlecast. That's going to be fun this Monday. Looking forward to it. Hope you have a great weekend in the meantime, and I'll talk to you later. Goodbye.